Hi everyone, Helen Blunden here. I hope you're happy, healthy and well. It is time for a new video where I share some of my life lessons learnt through the books that I have been reading. Now, a lot of the books that I get and I read are usually library books or they're secondhand books. Sometimes, very rarely, I buy the books new. Ultimately, the ones I have today are all library books and they're all from the same author, Annie Ernaux. She's a French author who has recently won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2022. I stumbled upon her books quite accidentally because they were in our library, and indeed I did do a video about one of her books, A Man's Place, which started me off on her reading, and then I went off and I borrowed some of the other books. For the last couple of days I've just been reading these and gleaning, I guess, some of my own perceptions and feelings and even some emotions that have come out through her writing. You don't otherwise know Annie Ernaux writes very differently. Her style could be described as a living autobiography. She writes in a method where she is the story. Her life is the story. The characters in her books are people that she has met or her family, herself, and she is in fact writing a journal. So I guess you can describe it as a living autobiography, a journal, or a memoir. The thing is, she's still living, so she is in effect kind of trying to set her life on paper. Life doesn't come alive until she writes about it. It is something that you really have to read for yourself. I figure that is the reason why she won the Nobel Prize, because it was described as her writing being brave and courageous. 4 books that I'll talk about, but not in detail as to what they're about. I just want to actually talk about the general feeling I got about her writing overall. It is A Simple Passion, where it is a short book and she writes about a love affair she had with a younger married Russian diplomat. The Young Man, which again, another smaller book about some memory snippets of an affair she had with a younger man. This one, which I enjoyed most, called Look at the Lights, My Love. And this one was her recollections and memory snippets of her time in a supermarket, the Oken market. We don't have that in Australia. It is basically her recollections of the people who visit the supermarket, her observations of, I guess, the people, the workers in the supermarket, the products. And believe it or not, this is the one I enjoyed the most, simply because I could relate to it. This one, called Getting Lost, which were her specific diaries of each of her days that she wrote while she was having this affair with the Russian diplomat. This one and this one go together. Although sometimes by reading elements of this diary or this journal, you go back to some other situations that she mentions in other books. Overall, I mentioned that her type of writing is like capturing a memory. A lot of her writing are just simply snippets, little short memory pieces. And she writes, I think she writes quite beautifully. Some people say that she writes in a very bare minimum manner, minimal emotion, minimal adjectives, not fairly emotive. But I think just the way that she describes it in very simple manner is enough to get us to think and actually connect with the story. Although there isn't really much of a story, it's just simply recollection of her memories. Writes in a very honest way, maybe sometimes a very brutally honest way. In her writing, she explains the situation and she also covers what is happening in the environment and what is happening in the world. So we place ourselves at a time and place in the world. In actual fact, it is a diary. And she feels that she doesn't and can't fully experience something unless she writes about it. And I do wonder about that sometimes. As I was reading it, I connected with some of the things that she wrote about. I thought to myself, Is this fair on the people in her life? Is this something that they are aware that if something happens to her, they're going to be written about? Given that it is a living autobiography and that she is publishing her memoirs while she is still alive, while her life is still happening, while she's still experiencing things and meeting people and talking to them, there is sometimes I felt a level of voyeurism in that, and also at times I felt a level of discomfort as to what I was reading, simply because I thought, my God, she's so courageous to put herself out there, to be completely vulnerable and expressing her feelings and emotions of what she's going through at a time that we can also understand, because sometimes maybe we have been through very similar things that she has been through. So it got me thinking about the fact that reading her writing, I felt as if sometimes I wasn't alone. I thought, you know how sometimes we get in our heads and we think, oh, no one else thinks this way, or I must be the only person going through this. Her writing actually identifies the fact that, well, if she's written about it, other people are thinking about the same things. Her writing allowed me to have this penny drop moment, thinking that I'm not alone. I'm not the only person who thinks this way, or I'm not the only person who has experienced something through that. Okay, I must admit, I haven't experienced a lot of things that she has. Like I said, the book that was the most relevant for me was her supermarket experiences. I guess that must say something about me, who finds a lot more interest in supermarkets than ultimate passions. But what I liked about this was the fact that she made this observation about the community, and community has always been an interest of mine, where people connect, where people collaborate, where people learn from each other and with each other, where people congregate. So I guess it makes sense for me to have liked this book. I liked it because of the fact that she brought to light and she made visible the things that we probably either take for granted or that we don't notice when we go to the supermarket, or we only notice snippets of things. We might notice, the cashier being full and having to put us and use the self-checkout. We might notice a little child screaming. We might notice a product on sale, but we really don't notice, I guess, the life and what we can glean from others, and what, what's in their trolley, and what the stories about the products they buy and why they buy and who they are and why they're there. And so she deeply goes into that aspect, which I quite enjoyed. The other ones were interesting, I must admit. I think they were interesting simply because the way they were written. Now, these ones were, like I mentioned, memory snippets. And this one was about her passion for a young man. Now, she's in her 40s. The way that she writes it is really interesting from the point of view, obviously, from the older woman who has been there and done that. She has already experienced passion and love and a lot of the things that she does with this young man already with her previous husband and a life. So I had to kind of chuckle at times, thinking that it felt like she was his mother. I know it wasn't meant to be funny, but there were times where these images where she would be cutting up fruit for him just like a child, and I had to kind of shake my head. A Simple Passion and Getting Lost was her memoirs of a passion that she had with this Russian diplomat, and I must admit I preferred this smaller book than the Getting Lost, which were her full diaries. And I'm going to actually put it out there that I did not read her full diary. I simply, around page 48, said, enough, I can't read this anymore. I simply felt that this was way too raw, too honest, too harsh, and admittedly I did feel like the Russian diplomat that she was having an affair with was a bit of a dick. And I know I shouldn't take this on board with regards to, it's not like a novel, it's not meant to be read like a novel, but a lot of the feelings and the passions and the emotions that she went through, I think it's not her writing which is, I guess, to me, not valuable. It's the fact that I could connect with her feelings in other ways. but it was too honest and too raw and too voyeuristic, if that makes sense, that I felt that there was an element that, I wish to have like a distance apart. There is some element that I thought writing a memoir and writing a living memoir is too voyeuristic for my life, which is kind of weird, because in a world where we have social media, in a world where we basically video ourselves or we take photos of our entire lives, our snippet of life, and that we share it to the public, how is writing any different to that? And so I had to really think about her books and think about her writing and say, is what she's doing any different to, say, people sharing their lives on vlogs, on social media, and sharing everything, their ins and outs of their day, their whole lives? Why is writing something, expressing yourself, a lot more raw and a lot more real than seeing what we see on social media? It also made me question a lot about revealing our true selves. For one, I have been writing journals just like Annie has for many, many years. I've lost track as to how many journals I've been writing since 15, and I'm now in my 50s, and I've basically journaled my entire life. These journals were and will not be meant for public consumption. You simply don't want to. And in fact, I have not even read my journals posts. I cannot go back to read them, because I feel as if I have pretty much gone through those entire emotions, I've gone through those entire feelings, and I've dealt with whatever I've had to deal with. To bring it back, to actually keep going back and reading through it, I feel as if it is irrelevant. It's passé, it's gone, it's over. To have it published like Annie has is really interesting, because you're constantly then keeping it out in the public. You're constantly having to refer to it. You're constantly having to come back to it. Are you really dealing with it? And so I had a question in my head as to, if we reveal our true selves, does this make it all the more relevant? Is it the more real if we have to expose it publicly? Or do we keep it private? Is it the best thing to keep our true selves private and to have these published after we die, to have our journals after we go? Does that make it more relevant? It brought in a lot of questions for me, and I also started to think about these influencers on these social media platforms who are at the mercy of their audience. Are they more real? Do they have a more real life if everything they do is expressed for an audience? Is it more real if they share what they think, what they know, what they like, what they write, what they do, what they create? Is it the more real because they're doing it for an audience, for a reaction, for a product to sell? Or is the true test of true character if you keep it to yourself? I don't know. But these are the questions that have been going through my head when I read Annie Ernaux. For now, I've decided I'm going to stop reading her books, simply because there are no more books at the library that I could borrow. But there's a whole heap of other books that I can actually download, because she has written many, and she has written a lot over the years. These are just my, I guess, simple first rambling thoughts about the books of Annie Ernaux, how and why I found them difficult to read, what questions they brought up for me, especially in the world where our entire lives now are pretty much online for the benefit of an audience. Does it make it right? Does it make it real? Is our life and our lived experience more real if it is shared publicly, or if it is enjoyed or shared at a more personal level to ourselves, privately, or in our own journals which are never meant for public eyes or to be published ever. That's it. Thank you for listening and thank you for watching. Bye for now.